All right, so in this video, I'm wanting to look at kind of a refresher for how we got the sine and cosine graphs. I'm going to be making some connections in upcoming videos related to their graphs, okay? And then maybe sometime down the road, we'll talk about graphing, different transformations of sine and cosine. All right, so your sine graph is a little wavy function. It goes on forever and ever. And, cosine is like super similar to it, right? I want to look at how we get those graphs, all right? So the way we start it is we started with right triangles, and sine is the ratio of the opposite side to the hypotenuse and all that business. But then we graduated to thinking about it in terms of the unit circle. All right, so on the unit circle, we start at angle 0, all right? And sine is the y value of the point on the unit circle. Sine is the y value of, yeah, that's right. Sine is always the y value of the point on the unit circle. And so at angle 0, so when the angle is 0 itself, you get an output of 0, all right? So I can plot that point there. And then we're going to make a lap. We're going to go all the way around it, which is a full 360 degrees. And that's going to be the main, I guess the main window, the main, it's the main viewing. Like, you know how sine repeats itself over and over and over and over? The main part that we recognize for sine is the interval from 0 until it gets to 2 pi. So that's how I'm going to draw my graph here. So this is going to be 2 pi out here. And if I do a full lap around the circle, a full lap, if I go back to 2 pi, well, my y value is back to 0. So I get 0 again, right? Let me do some more tick marks here. If this is 2 pi and this is 0, then pi is going to be right smack dab in the middle. All right, that'll be an important one. And actually, let's go ahead and do it. Pi is going to be right here. And that one has a y value of 0. Right? So it goes back to 0 again right there. Between pi and 0, that's going to be 1/2 pi, or pi over 2. And if we look between pi and 2 pi, right? So between pi and 2 pi is going to be this angle right here, which is 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2. And let's get those y values according to the unit circle real quick. So at pi over 2, there's a y value here of 1, and that's the highest that this graph ever makes it to. So the highest it ever gets to is 1, and that occurs at pi over 2. And at 3 pi over 2, it's the y value here is -1. So I'll draw a -1. And down there. Okay, so I've got some points. I could go ahead and do pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. I could do pi over 3, pi over 6, but there'd be like way too many little tick marks. Anyway, these are enough to get us started as far as the graph goes. We kind of have a feel for what's going to happen anyway. So it's going to rise here, and then that's going to be its relative maximum there. And then it's going to dip down to pi and cross through and do the same thing at 3 pi over 2. That's its relative minimum. And it's going to go up to 2 pi. So there's our graph of sine of x. So you could use this graph to answer questions like, oh, what's pi over 4? Well, or sine of pi over 4. Well, I know pi over 4 is in between 0 and pi over 2. So I know it's got to be right here. And then you would just follow that up to wherever the graph is right there. And that's going to give you root 2 over 2. That's that y value there. You could, do, I don't know what, some other angle. What's between 180 and 270? Let's say you were doing like sine of 200. That's going to be in between these two values somewhere. So it's going to be negative. The output would be negative. All right. Let me go ahead and continue this backwards as well. So I could go down to negative 2 pi. I could go to negative pi. I could do negative pi over 2 here and negative 3 pi over 2 there. All right. And we're going to get the same little wavy function, just a copy of this, but it's going to go in reverse. So at pi over 2, at negative pi over 2, it's going to be negative 1. At negative pi, it's going to be 0 again. All right, so it's going to make a little something like this, a little dip. Okay, and then it's going to keep rising. And then once it gets to negative 2 pi, it's going to get back onto the 0. So at negative 3 pi over 2, we're going to reach a 1. Something like this. That'll have to work for me. I'm going to be using this graph later, so I just want to get the gist of it right here. Okay, for cosine, cosine, my labels are going to be the same. Let's do 2 pi. This will be pi. This will be pi over 2. This will be 3 pi over 2. And that'll be 0. Okay. So at an angle of 0, remember cosine is our x values. So this point has an x value of 1. So that's why cosine starts off at 0. It's going to start off at a y value of 1. All right, the output's going to be a 1 there. And then if we go up to pi over 2, at pi over 2, the x value is 0. All right, if we go over to pi, the x value is negative 1. So at pi, this is going to have an output of negative 1. So let me draw that. Okay. And then at 3 pi over 2, it's going to reach 0 again for the x value. All right, so at 3 pi over 2, the output is 0. And then at 2 pi, well, it's going to be back to where we started with. It's got an x value of 1. So at 2 pi, it's going to be up here again. Cool. Okay, let me try to connect these dots here. All right, so we're going to fall. We're going to fall from 0 to pi over 2. We're going to make a little something like, boy, it's harder to draw cosine. And then we're going to dip down. All right. There we go. Jeez. So we're still graphing it on the interval 0 to 2 pi, and we still have that up and down motion. So I don't know, they just definitely look different, don't they? Yeah. But once we complete the graph this way, you're going to see that they really are super similar to each other. All right, so let me do negative 2 pi over here. This can be my negative pi. This will be my negative pi over 2. And this can be my negative 3 pi over 2. All right, so just so we're where we want to be here. So if I go negative pi over 2 units, that's going to be rotating this way. And the x value there is 0. So I got 0. And then at negative pi, I'm going to have an x value of negative 1. So that's going to dip way down low, be my relative minimum. Okay. And if I rotate negative 3 pi over 2, so that's a full 270, right? That's going to put my x value, that's going to put my x value at 0. So that's why I have a 0 there. And if I rotate all the way around, negative 2 pi, I'm back up at 1 again. Okay. Jeez. All right, so I'm doing this backwards here. That'll work. That'll work. and then it's going to start falling again. All right, so there's our graph of cosine, there's our graph of sine, and we're going to come back to these in a little bit.